Have you ever been on a road trip and set your GPS to a destination only to have it take you down some very unpredictable and very unproductive paths? I have. And I'm sure that for most people that's happened too. And in life, a lot of times the GPS that we set doesn't seem to take us on the route we predicted. And we find ourselves in some very interesting situations. And that's what happened to my podcast guest today, Rick Young. He had set his course out for life. He was going to be a doctor. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. And along the way, a lot of twists and turns occurred. And instead of being a doctor, he retired from the military and wound up working at the CDC. It's a fascinating story, and I'm sure you're going to want to stick around for the interview. I'm Bill Hennessy, and this is the Finding Meaning and Purpose in Retirement podcast, where we take people who are in near retirement and help them navigate that chaos, change, and confusion so that they can find more fulfillment, friendship, and freedom through the podcast, through coaching, through an online community that's developing, through a retreat. And I just encourage you to stick around, enjoy the podcast today. I think you'll find the conversation really, really interesting. Let's go. Well, Rick, you've been on quite the adventure, and I'm fascinated by your story. So I'm really excited to hear about you and what's been going on in your world. So why don't you fill us in on this guy, Rick Young?
Sure. Thanks, Bill. I thank you for having me here. This has been life is a journey, and I think that's a good way to kind of approach things. Is it's not always about the destination; it's about the journey. And if we don't enjoy the journey as we go, then we miss out on so much in life. Life has provided me with all kinds of things and many things I never expected. Growing up, my biggest desire was to be a doctor. That's what I thought I wanted to be. And life took a different course. God had different plans for me. And I got into college and things went a little differently. I got introduced to this thing called Army ROTC. And like many college students, I chased some of the things that were less about my dreams and more about things that were, we'll just say, of the world. you know, Combine all those, and I went off into an army career, and medical school was left awry. So I made my plans. God, of course, marked my steps, and went on a journey from there, where I was convinced I'm just going to serve my time, and then I'm going to get out. But every time a time to get out came about, there was some reason that just kept drawing me back to continue to serve until about midway through my career. And I got really hooked on this thing called leadership and what it was all about, and the science and the passion of developing other leaders and helping people thrive. And lo and behold, 20 years goes by and there's time for a transition. And I transitioned multiple times, so retired from military, and this was in 2009. So it's been a minute since I did that transition. Quickly got into an environment that was not the best. It was not a healthy environment. Uh, I think the way it was told to me by one of my crusty advisors there was, "We didn't retire for this sort of stuff, did we?" And I was like, "No, we did not." So really being able to reflect on priorities. And I think that as you go through these transitions, it's something to key on is it's less about the thing that you do than and the who that you are, and in particular who you are. And had I known that early in my career, I might have made some different decisions. But I was always goal driven and focused, but not growth driven as much. So I transitioned quickly out of that role to a role that led me into government service. And I was down at the U.S. Central Command in Tampa, Florida for roughly 8 years. Great place, 2 miles from my office, making big things happen, traveling the world, doing things, impacting people. And as only God would have it, he introduced me on trips overseas to some people from the Centers for Disease Control, and rekindled this idea I had of working for the Centers for Disease Control. So I left a great situation there, transitioned over to working at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. We worked when was there for fast forward another 8 years, and after extraordinarily growth, I would say it's one thing having left the comfort zone of military. Really about 27, 8 straight years of being around military people to a different environment, different culture at the CDC. So who's able to grow in so many ways, and my leadership was challenged, my personal growth was challenged, and being called to be a leader there was it's still only something God could arrange. It really put me in the opportunity to grow my leadership, to understand how how best to communicate to others, especially people that are a little culturally different from that clique of the military type, if you will. Not too long ago, we had a big change in the government. Through I guess if you go back just a little bit, COVID and all these things happening, and we're doing a lot of remote work at the CDC. And my wife and I had decided we're going to choose a place to live. So we bought some land in Charleston, South Carolina. We started developing that land, and we're working remotely. We're like, well, heck, why don't we just go ahead and move? So, yeah, doing that. I'm driving back and forth to Atlanta once a month, happy as a lark. And next thing you know, no more, no more telework. So I couldn't quite make a 6 hour drive each way every day to the Atlanta office. And my priorities were pretty set. I knew who I was, and as a husband, I'm not going to leave my wife anymore. Those days were long since behind me in military service, and that was not for this phase of my life. That's not something that was on my docket, at least. And so I took an opportunity to retire once again and undergo another transition. And if I'm just being transparent, this particular transition was challenging. Leave
And then you got to the CLDC and things didn't turn out the way that you thought they'd turn out with the remote work. And now you're making this transition into another retirement. And you talk about it being difficult. And I think that, one of the things I speak about a lot with retired people is this loss of expectation. We have it in our minds how things are going to work. And then when we get there, it looks nothing quite like that. So, how have you dealt with that sense of I didn't see this coming, or this isn't what I thought it'd look.
Think the key for me has been remembering whose I am and that God has a specific purpose for me. And I probably couldn't have done this 20 years ago. Now each stage of life, it's just a little bit more of a challenge, just a little bit more of an expectation that he throws out there for me. And knowing really who I am and staying true to my values has allowed me to work through each of those situations. Heck, I didn't even know I was going to be a leader at the CDC when I first applied for a job. I'm interviewing with the second round of interviews with the hiring manager, and he started asking me questions about dealing with union employees and things like that. And I'm like, this is for a supervisory position. I thought you were just hiring me to be one of the supervised. So it's you never know what God's got in store, but knowing that and becoming more self-aware as you go. What are my strengths and my weaknesses? Where's God leading me? And being able to take that next step, I think is a key thing. Like I know that Dr. King said, you don't have to see the entire staircase. You just have to take the next step. And sometimes that's the way it's got to be on these things.
I mean, it's the guy who buys the or has the dream in his mind of buying 160 acres somewhere and living remotely, and then gets to retirement, realizes that puts him too far from his cardiologist, it puts him too far from his financial advisor, too far from his this or that. And the next thing you know, he's trying to buy a place in the villages, not out of excitement, but out of disappointment. And, the truth is 160 acres at 67 or 70 years old might not be the joy we thought it was. So, I hear you talking about what you've made these adjustments and, you seem to have a smile on your face. And I think that maybe the difference between you and the next guy is you took the adjustment as a good thing. Other people see it as a compromise or a loss. What would you say to that?
Right. And I think that's a great point because it can easily be seen as a loss. But I think in terms of being a person of faith and thinking of, God is opening and closing doors for a purpose and for a purpose for me. And remembering that, and it doesn't mean it's easy. I don't know how many doors were closed even in the last 6, 8 months of, positions I thought that this position is for me. This is it. It was tailor made for me. I know this is it. The interview went great, but no, it's not, that's not what it is. And then, after a little bit of sting that we've got to process and lean into as we deal with, various disappointments in our lives, and we can see that there is something more out there. God has got something for each and every one of us. And I know for me personally, I firmly believe to my core that my best is in front of me. And I don't know how to couch that other than I just believe it to the inside of me that he's got great plans for me. And we're going to see what those are. And he gives me what I need when I need.
I love the fact that God allowed you to be in a place where so many tens of thousands of dollars were invested in you to train you in leadership. And now you're a free man, you're your own boss, and you have all this leadership insight, all that investment's been paid. And now you're looking to pay it back in a sense and invest it in others. And maybe you can kind of tell me what that looks like.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to because that transition, as I mentioned, was not the easiest, and I was targeting position, all the things that uh, I should do, that my resume says that I should do. I should be, I should just be a senior leader someplace, and I should manage some sort of organization and these sorts of things. And when those doors weren't opening, it took some reflective time to figure out what was my calling, what are my passions, what have I thrived at over the years and just thoroughly enjoyed. And as I look back at both of my military career, I had opportunities to lead a ROTC program. I had opportunities to be uh, a leader of the different phases of officer education for my branch. Subsequently, especially at the Centers for Disease Control, I got to lead our professional development and leadership development programs and really coach, teach, and mentor people and, help people build not just a thriving organization, but also themselves to thrive as they go forward. And I said, that is where my passion was. I talked to a coach, a mentor, if you will, and somebody that we had done a lot of work with, and he and I were talking, and I was really thinking that training was going to be my thing, specifically just being a trainer or instructor. And as he and I talked, he's like, you know something, Rick, I know you can train people, but what I hear you telling me is you really want to be a coach. And I was like, "Oh, well, it's, how nice is to have somebody to speak that truth into you and help you see things that you don't always see, um, you know, happen many, many times." And I was like, wow. And so that led me to, Maxwell Leadership initially and working through that, becoming a certified trainer, coach, and speaker and disc consultant. And then also led me to to faith to influence and the community there, the Christian coaches. So, and that's really where I'm at, and I just feel that I'll be able to give back to people and help values-based leaders, thrive through uncertainty and change, and build resilience and strengthen their teams.
Sure, sure. Maxwell is famous for saying leadership is influence. And I think what's interesting about the lane that God's brought you into with coaching is you could lead an organization, even a large organization, and not have near the influence that you would have by training that same number of leaders, working with them as a coach and actually curating that conversation with them to where they see the things that you've been able to see yourself and maybe take the next 5 or 6 steps in leadership in a shorter period of time than they would if they tried to do this on their own. And I think, I love coaching for that reason. It's actually helping a person draw out of themselves the answer that is already there, and you're just helping them uncover that idea. And I think that's so much better in a lot of ways than command, if you will, and just saying you did this and you did that. People may obey you. I mean, obviously in the military, that's how the military works, is the commander commands. But the true leader influences, and you're able to lead not from rank, but from experience, and not from a position of authority, but from a life of authority. The authority given to you is now being given to someone else, and that's fun. So, where do you see this taking you in the next 2 to 3 years? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, my vision is to build out this coaching, training, and doing some speaking business so that I can impact people mainly on the local level, but I see that I'll be able to provide, add value to them, and then hopefully watch them add value to others. And, that's where I've consistently got the greatest joy is watching subordinates thrive in all kinds of different environments. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity to give that back, um, wherever God takes me in that journey.
Sure, sure. And what's really exciting to me is, you've retired a couple of times now, and you're still a young guy. And, this is my point with retirement, meaning and purpose in retirement is some of us are going to live 30 years after we retire. And that's a long, long time to sit back and just watch me TV or, dip a line in a lake. As good as those things might be for a couple of minutes in a day, or even a couple of hours in a day, you sure wouldn't want that to be your life. And you've figured out, hey, I can do these things, and I can, certify in this way, and I can make a change in multiple people's lives. And still, what I keep reflecting back on with your life and with some other people that I've interviewed is, the military ethos is such a powerful tool to be able to communicate to a person who never had that privilege of serving, or never took that responsibility to serve, might be the better way of phrasing that. You learned all those things, and you can convey that to someone like me who's never been in the military. And I think that that's probably going to add a lot of value to civilian leadership, would be to have some of the ethos that you've been trained in, bleed over into civilian life. I could see that really making a powerful impact just in terms of how we deal with problems and how you see your responsibility and duty being carried out, and the responsibilities to fix everything and the responsibilities to carry out your responsibility. So maybe talk about leadership in that sense for just a second here. Why is it important to have some of the disciplines that you would have learned while serving in the military applied to civilian life?
Well, I think that much of that is translates directly, as you said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But there are value sets, and there are things that set us up to gain that influence. And I think the military gives us a great foundation to springboard off of that, whether it's worth that work ethic or a known and standardized value base that we can operate off of, and we understand the importance of character and these sorts of things. It's particularly difficult in our current times, because if there's one thing constant, it's change, right? And change is happening at
record pace for all of us. And especially as we get older, because, we're seeing the exponential growth. We're on the top part of that exponential curve because we've seen it where it wasn't changing as much in our earlier days. So we've got to navigate all of these things that are going. So you've got to have that. I really feel you got to have that core there, and then we can translate that. And ironically, I used to speak on this in my last military days as a ROTC guy. I used to give a speech called The Myth of Military Leadership. And it was exactly that. I said, we do have authority that comes from our positions, but ultimately, leadership is about being a good leader. It's about valuing people, serving them, allowing them to thrive, setting those conditions, growing them so that they outpace us at some point in time. Those sorts of things, and I think that whether it's
whether
people,
it's
our
people,
generation
our
or perhaps
generation or
the younger generation that needs us to pour into them, because they're the ones that are going to carry the torch forward. They're the ones that are going to build the future. And we just need that so much. There's such a competition for people's minds and attentions nowadays, and not all of it's healthy. And it can be a place where people are challenged in leading their families, they're challenged in leading their organizations, their communities, and we want to build people that can thrive in these environments, that can make a difference, so that our next generation can live with they can be the next great generation or the greatest generation and take the place of our World War II veterans and things of that nature.
Sure. Sure. So what I really hear you saying is that investing in leaders builds a better overall community, and that you're helping to create a different destiny for like the American life coming up in days ahead. I mean, what would it be like if we could really not just look back on the greatest generation, but look eye to eye with the greatest generation? I think that that's maybe what's motivating a lot of us who are older to invest in younger people, is to recognize that, hey, we don't have to just look back on the best days. We can help the best days be in front of us by maybe mentoring and investing in someone younger than ourselves. I mean, I'm not saying we're the best generation. I think that probably was those folks that, lived through the Depression, World War II, that type of thing. But we certainly know enough about them to pass on the best lessons to the people who behind us. And if we do that, then I think we will be remembered as a very powerful generation who were able to convey things that we witnessed and bring those truths to the next generation. So if there were one last thing that you wanted to say to people about making the most of this season of life, what would you say?
I think I would
I think
springboard
I would springboard
on what you said,
on
Bill,
what you
and
said,
that's
Bill,
about,
and that's about.
I think we've got an
I think we've got
obligation
an
to
obligation
pour into
to
others,
pour into others,
and
and
we have to
we
invest
have to
in
invest
in
in
our younger
our younger
folks.
folks.
There is,
There is,
we're just in such a
we're just in
challenging
such a
time that
challenging time that
we got to build for the
we got to
future,
build for the
and the
future,
notion
and the
that you
notion
know
that
the
you know
Gen Zers, Gen X's, pick your Gen, they don't get it or whatever. It's just they're dealing with different things. We're dealing with different things than the greatest generation did. We got to be the best we can be in our generation, and we got to help them to be the best that they can be, because we owe it to building the kingdom. We owe it to building our nation. We want them to thrive. So let's make this whole place
let's make
better.
this.
I
Right.
thank you for your life and service. I thank you for making a commitment to the next generation. And I really look forward to working with you in the days ahead.
Yeah, same here, Bill.
Yeah,
Thank you
same
very
here, Bill.
much.
Thank
God
you very
bless.
much.
How many times has your story turned out the way that you predicted? You had something in mind when you started off on a particular journey, but the journey took on a life of its own. And I'm sure you'll understand after hearing Rick's story that that's what happened for him today. But it's led him to a great place. Rick is a Maxwell certified coach. He leads Fourth Line Leadership Coaching, and you can find that at fourthlineleadership.com. He is launching into a whole new season and has some great opportunities for you to work with him. I'd encourage you to go to the website, check out what he's doing. He's running a special on his services until December 15th. By the way, I would really love it if you would leave a comment and like or subscribe to this podcast wherever you found it. It would really help me to get the word out and get the word to other people about what we're trying to do. My goal is to start a movement of people who have lived a little while, but who have no intention of stepping back away from life and living just because they've retired. So it would really help me if you would subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment, and tell me how I'm doing with this. I'd love to hear from you. Again, leave a comment, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.